I better have a look at these advertiser-friendly content guidelines. Inappropriate language including harassment, profanity, and vulgar language. So I've got to talk about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump without swearing. Okay. Let's get my fucking intellect. Oh, fuck! Okay, well, they set this up. America. You have a presidential election once every 4 years, which means between the ages of 18 and 65, between coming of age and retiring, you get 11 chances to affect the future of your country in this way. Let's say you spend the first few chances learning that things said before the election don't happen after the election. Let's say you spend another 2, maybe 3, hoping that that will be different this time. Or sticking with the party that you voted for before, or generally feeling they're seducing me again, it's okay. And let's say you spend the last 5 thinking, what the fuck, partially disenfranchised, seen it all before, this is a load of shit. This is the working life story of your presidential votes, and I hope to explain how they do this.
Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you, Lester, and thanks to Hofstra for hosting us. The central question in this election is really what kind of country we want to be and what kind of future we'll build together.
Well, that may be your view of the priorities in this election, but the question was, how are you better than Trump for creating better paid jobs? Here, Hillary has substituted the guy's question with a question that she prefers the sound of. And all she's doing is steering this idea of which future is better. She wants to steer it in her favour because that's a safer argument than the actual economics. And it's safer because it's easier to slur Donald Trump and say he's going to produce quite a vicious business stroke nature animalistic future if you let him. That's why she's moved the question that way. But it's bollocks. She's vote mongering rather than answering the question, which makes her not all that good a candidate for actually getting the job done.
Today is my granddaughter's 2nd birthday, so I think about this a lot.
This is Hillary's attempt to appear human. My granddaughter's 2nd birthday. I'm human. I've got a vested interest in the future of the country. Trust me. Doesn't make any difference. We're all human. We've all got a vested interest in the country. It's not as if Hillary Clinton's granddaughter is going to struggle later in life, considering the sort of finances that the Clintons have behind them to pass on to the next generations, or to give them a hand up while they're still here. What Hillary's done there in appearing human actually will work quite well. Slipping it in like that between 2 pieces of blah makes her more relatable.
First, we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top.
Hillary's first priority for the economy is a political myth. A capitalist economy will never be fair for everyone, will never work for everyone. The American economy routinely delivers a 10 to 20% unemployment rate. And the unemployment rate, with its threat of losing your home, starving, not being able to look after your kids, not being able to give your kids a decent future, these things frighten people into working hard on shitty wages in shitty and sometimes meaningless jobs. That's how the lower end of the capitalist system works. It's a fear-based system. Without that fear, people would refuse to do the shitty jobs and the system would collapse. Now, people are stuck at the bottom end is not necessarily their own fault. People in poverty tend to be under a lot of stress. They're in an unhealthy, high-stress situation and they have raised levels of cortisol in their body. Now, cortisol affects your ability to concentrate, focus, remember, things like this. It turns you a little bit more animal, because that's what it's for, evolutionary speaking. With stress in the system, it's only supposed to last a few minutes. We've got people living in poverty where the stress is lasting weeks, months, years. Poverty comes in the door, love flies out the window, and if they've got kids, they've got even more pressure on them, and they're basically shouting at each other and having a continually high stress existence. Now, the children pick that up. Children are very receptive to the home environment, so especially if they're getting shouted at and smacked around themselves, the kids themselves will have higher cortisol levels in their bodies, which means when they go to school they underperform because they can't concentrate. And this is why families in America stay in poverty for generations. there's been a lot of race-based cultural friction videos, and I've been playing a part in I suppose, the anti-racism thing on my channel. Now, a lot of people saying black people commit more crime. It actually has nothing to do with skin colour. Poverty is linked to crime. Let's say there's a big, massive cheesecake that is all the money in America. Let's say you get a guy with elevated levels of cortisol in his system. He lives in the projects. He hasn't done very well at school. He's getting involved in gang violence because he feels that way. He's got a kinship with the poor, stressed, elevated cortisol level people around him. So he's involved in gang violence. Now this guy won't be able to get a job, basically. Can't express himself well. He's got no qualifications. Wherever he goes, they go fuck off. He can't travel very far because he's got no means, and the area he lives in is economically depressed. He's fucked. His way of getting into the cheesecake that is the American economy, he hasn't gotten in. So, in order to draw survival money from the system, he cheats. He breaks the rules because he has to. And that's your criminal class. This guy's now in your criminal class, and it's very much cause and effect how he got there. He's taking money out of the big cheesecake the only way he can, because he can't get it by legitimate means, and then he gets treated as a aggressor, he gets treated as a criminal, thrown in jail, and will probably end up on one of these bloody work things. He's no better than a slave. And black people have got it all wrong when they say this is about race. This is not about race, this is about poverty. But those black families who are still in poverty conditions have been there since their fucking forefathers were freed. That's how long this lasts for. When your family gets stuck in poverty, it will basically take a miracle to claw them out of there. Now, at the other end of the system, you've got families who do have money, who are wealth. This is where the black people's accusation that white people, you have a head start on us, comes from. There's inheritance, climbing the ladder, social standing. You've had plenty of time to do that, yet there are still white people at the bottom of the rung. Of course there are. There are white families in poverty forever as well. It's just not as visible as in the case of black people, because black people are a smaller percentage of the population. But there are a hell of a lot of white people in this situation too. Now, if you look at the richer end, I talk about this cheesecake economy and how you get money out of it. The best way to get money out of it is to invest in it. You invest in it, you buy something, you own something, you buy and sell something. If you've got a lot of money, that gives you a fucking JCB to tuck into the cheesecake. Compared to the black guy in poverty that I talked about, he can't even grab a handful. If you've already got means, you can chunk that stuff out as much as you like. If there's economic recession, you can sit and snap up businesses and buildings at cost value or cheaper, and then sell them when the economy recovers. If you've got money, you are so able to pull resources from the cheesecake that nobody compete with you, and especially not a poor man. The way to tackle that situation would need that capitalism as we know it would need a major overhaul. You would have to do something massive like take out private ownership and replace it with worker ownership of businesses. You would have to lean to the left significantly before you could make an economy that's fair for everyone. And now Americans are not going to accept communism or socialism extreme, but there are things you can do here. There are economists who have put forward ideas. There are rich people now putting forward ideas, alternatives to capitalism. Lady Rothschild did a presentation on alternatives to capitalism. You know, even rich people are a little bit concerned about this capitalist model now. It won't work. It's hammering the working class. The middle class is disappearing because of the way capitalism works. The bottom end of the tier is getting bigger, and when it gets to a certain size, the peasants will revolt, as it were. So this thing, what Hilary says here, we need to make an economy that's fair for everyone. All she's doing is giving you that soundbite. She only needs you to waver on that for 4 years, and then she can fuck off, and the next person comes in and promises an economy that's fair for everyone, and your votes start to get burned. And it's not that this is a recent thing. This has been happening for hundreds of years.
That means we need new jobs, good jobs, with rising incomes. I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business.
I hope you can already see how that was just a list of nice sounding things. What Hilary is saying here, she cannot deliver. The government does not invest in business, does not invest in manufacturing, any private business. The government simply does not do that. The investment into private businesses, into small businesses, comes from the private sector and will come from the rich people I just discussed. She can have no beneficial impact on the economy, and I'll tell you why. Because the American economy every 7 years suffers a recession. Every 14 years it suffers a major recession. And every 60 years it suffers a near catastrophic failure. Only thing she can do to try and get people to invest in this, and remember, if you invest to your limit, if the rich guy puts his all in, or if someone takes out a loan to do this, they run the risk of ending up at the poverty end of the scale. That's the price of ownership failure in the capitalist model. So these investors are always cautious. They don't want to be in that thing, and the rough riding shitty waves of the American economy means that they will invest cautiously, and there's nothing Hilary can do about that. She can offer subsidies. She might be able to figure a business loan system. That itself, with the threat of putting someone in poverty and leaving them in debt if their business idea failed. She cannot do this. She cannot encourage the investment she's talking about. This is empty words.
We also have to make the economy fairer. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work.
Hilary's only been talking for 2 minutes. This is her second big myth. She's talking about equal pay for women, and she thinks she's going to guarantee herself half the vote. She's going to appeal to women by doing this. But she's busted herself as having economic ignorance. She doesn't know that these stats are flawed. And don't just take my word for it. I have a professor dude queued up to explain this.
Another contemporary economic myth is that women make 75 cents for every dollar men make because they're discriminated against in labor markets. Like other myths, this does have a kernel of truth to it. So for example, if you add up all the incomes of women and divide by the number of women in the labor force, and then do the same thing for men, what you'll find is on average, women do make about 75% of what men do. What's happening here is not discrimination in the labor market, but differences in the choices that men and women make about investing in their knowledge, their education, their skills, and their job experience that lead to them getting paid different salaries. Economists talk about people's human capital. And by human capital, we mean the knowledge, the skills, the education, and the job experience that people have. And economics argues that people get paid wages according to that human capital. It turns out that men and women invest very differently in their human capital. And we can see that in 4 different ways. First of all, educational choices. Men, for example, tend to go into fields like engineering. Women tend to go into social sciences, into psychology, into nursing. And so where men are making higher salaries as engineers or perhaps in the business world, women tend to end up in jobs for which their salaries are somewhat lower. So even though they may have the same years of schooling, the different choices they've made about their majors lead to them working in different areas and getting paid differently. Secondly, men and women have different expectations about work. For example, if women expect down the road to take time off to raise children, they'll make different choices today about what kinds of skills they acquire than if they imagine they'll be working full-time for the rest of their lives. And we know historically that many women in the 1960s and 70s didn't imagine that they would be working full-time at age 40 and ended up making choices that led them to have jobs when they were working at age 40 that didn't pay as well as they might have otherwise. Younger women today, of course, are more likely to imagine themselves working at age 40 and therefore make different investments today. Another difference between men and women is full versus part-time work. Women are much more likely than men to work part-time, men are more likely to work full-time. And part-time work, even for the same kinds of jobs, tends to pay less than full-time work. And women tend to prefer part-time work more than men because women still tend to take on the majority of the responsibility for children in the home. Finally, men and women differ in terms of their tenure on a job or the way in which their careers get interrupted. If it's the case that women take time off from the workforce to raise children, that will have an impact on their salaries down the road. So when we put these 4 things together, what we get is that the difference between men and women's pay is not a result of labor market discrimination, but of the choices that men and women make before they enter the labor market or even when they're in the labor market about the kinds of jobs they want to have and the way they want to balance family and work. Studies that have tried to control for all these factors have shown that if you take a man and a woman, same experience, same education, same job, and compare their salaries, what you find is that women make about 98% of what men do. So that gender wage gap pretty much disappears. And in some jobs, women actually make more.
I don't care how much of a cherished belief it may be by people like Anita Sarkozy, but the wage gap is an urban myth. Now, there's only two reasons for Hilary to talk about the wage gap in her opening answer in the presidential debate. One of them is that she doesn't know the fact. She's unaware of it being an urban myth and economically ignorant, which clearly makes her a bad candidate. Or she knows damn well that it's a myth, but she also knows that a lot of people believe it, and she's appealing to votes based on that ignorance, which makes her an unbelievably manipulative liar. If she's saying that in the knowledge of it being a myth, she's an even worse candidate.
I also want to see more companies do profit sharing. If you help create the profits, you should be able to share in them, not just the executives at the top.
Hilary said, I want to see more profit sharing. This is a generalised preference, not a commitment, not a stated intent from a would-be president. This is something she's worded carefully because she knows she can't deliver it. What is interesting here, there are places that do profit sharing now, quite a lot. I've worked for a company that did profit share, and on a good year you could get an extra month's pay from that bonus. It was pretty good. But Hilary has mentioned executives here, and it's very telling. That extra month's pay pales in significance compared to what should be happening in the American economy. Back in the 60s, Time magazine ran an article which basically took American economy's growth, raving about it, saying if this keeps up at this rate, by the year 2000, working class guy will get $200,000 a year. Now, Professor Richard Wolff has analysed their prediction, and it was accurate. They were right about economic growth, they were right about GDP, they were wrong about wages though. Now, it's not because the money isn't there, the money is there, perfectly in line with their prediction, but during the 70s and 80s, executives started taking credit for the booming economy and demanding higher pay. Now, if their wages as they stand now were even down and the money spread out across the workers, it would actually be true. An American working class individual would be getting $200,000 a year. That's how badly you're being ripped off. And Hilary's profit share wishy-washy I would like to see is going to do nothing to address that. This is another piece of American economy which has gone badly wrong. It's not working as it should. It's not serving the people as it should. It's actually ripping them off from what they're entitled to, having worked in this system the way it runs.
And I want us to do more to support people who are struggling to balance family and work. I've heard from so many of you about the difficult choices you face and the stresses that you're under. So let's have paid family leave, earned sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable childcare and debt-free college. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by having the wealthy pay their fair share.
This is starting to sound more like policy, but she hasn't stated who the wealthy are in this view. Is she going to raise income tax, which is already at an all-time high in America, or is she going to raise corporation tax, which means she will put off the investors and all those industries she mentioned earlier, the clean energy, infrastructure and manufacturing? If this is a flagship policy, it should come with clear borders. It's not a flagship policy, it's another set of words designed to sound well-meaning, but which don't sit in her portfolio of vagueness. Even as vague as it is, it contradicts what she's already said.
And close the corporate loopholes.
Part of the reason that the corporate loopholes have never been closed is that when you make the corporations pay their fair share, they take the piss and move their companies to other countries where the tax burden is less. Now, this has given a situation where some countries are competing for lowest tax. The UK have just done it, we've just done it in the wake of the Brexit referendum. This idea of Britain is open for business. They've kicked it off by lowering taxes for businesses. Now you're in competition if you do want to generate jobs and keep your economy growing and all this stuff. You can't close those corporation loopholes. As unpleasant as that sounds, you're fucked. And you're fucked because of the system, because of the way capitalism works, because of the economy. Those people will take their investment elsewhere if you say they have to pay their fair share.
Finally, we tonight are on the stage together, Donald Trump and I. Donald, it's good to be with you. We're going to have a debate where we are talking about the important issues facing our country. You have to judge us. Who can shoulder the immense, awesome responsibilities of the presidency? Who can put into action the plans that will make your life better? I hope that I will be able to earn your vote on November 8th.
This democratic process replaces the process of monarchs and subjects, a system whereby the subjects revolt and take the monarch's goddamn head off if they get really pissed off with it. Now here we have the bloodletting has been turned into a technicality. Every 4 years we chop the monarch's head off and vote in the person who sounds better, or sounds better in our view. But Hilary is saying the same things as Obama did, and Obama before that, and Bush, and Clinton, etc., etc., etc. She may as well have been in power since Kennedy got shot. If she'd been in power all that time, making the same promises every 4 years, you would want to take her fucking head off by now. This political process has delivered the same caliber of leader consistently. And if it wasn't for the illusion of things might change every 4 years, you would have revolted by now. Democracy is a cleaner, more bloodless system, but it's delivering, instead of a monarch who stays there until they get their head chopped off, it delivers a multi-headed monster that lives and dies, lives and dies, lives and dies, but basically never changes anything. And they can't change anything. This is a rich person's game running the country. Now, I'm not saying that in order to incite open rebellion. I'm saying that in the hope of inciting a more sensible approach to vote. Don't vote for the person that sounds like the person that came before. Don't vote for the same old shit. People come and say, I'm not going to do the same old shit. But when they say that, they're saying the same as the guys before. Vote for the person who makes the most fucking sense and whose policies make sense, not who's giving interesting sound bites.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, the same question to you. It's about putting more money into the pockets of American workers. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lester. Our jobs are fleeing the country. They're going to Mexico. They're going to many other countries. You look at what China is doing to our country in terms of making our product. They're devaluing their currency, and there's nobody in our government to fight them. And we have a very good fight, and we have a winning fight, because they're using our country as a piggy bank to rebuild China, and many other countries are doing the same thing. So we're losing our good jobs, so many of them. When you look at what's happening in Mexico, a friend of mine who builds plants said it's the 8th wonder of the world. They're building some of the biggest plants anywhere in the world, some of the most sophisticated, some of the best plants. With the United States, as he said, not so much. So Ford is leaving. You see that, their small car division leaving. Thousands of jobs, leaving Michigan, leaving Ohio. They're all leaving, and we can't allow it to happen anymore. As far as child care is concerned and so many other things, I think Hilary and I agree on that. We probably disagree a little bit as to numbers and amounts and what we're going to do, but perhaps we'll be talking about that later. But we have to stop our jobs from being stolen from us. We have to stop our companies from leaving the United States, and with it, firing all of their people. All you have to do is take a look at Carrier Air Conditioning in Indianapolis. They fired 1,400 people. They're going to Mexico. So many, hundreds and hundreds of companies are doing this. We cannot let it happen. Under my plan, I'll be reducing taxes tremendously. from 35% to 15% for companies, small and big businesses. That's going to be a job creator like we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan.
Trump has spent that entire time, he's almost burned his answering time on this one thing. And all he's talking about is outsourcing. You want to stop companies from outsourcing their services and manufacturing to cheaper countries. It's fucking simple. You either let it happen and suffer the consequences, like in Detroit. 3 major manufacturers left Detroit, fucked the city almost forever. I think it's only just starting to recover from that. That's what outsourcing does. This is how money grubbing works. If you want to cut your costs, you go to a cheaper place. You employ people halfway around the world for a fraction of the money. Modern technology allows you to do that. The distance isn't as impactful on your business as it once was. What are you going to do about it? Now, in Germany, it's illegal to take a factory away from an area. You can't do it. You might own it. You can't do it. You can't just pick up and go to a different country. The reason it's illegal to do that in Germany is because they have a stakeholder capitalism mentality towards it. That business in your German town, that's not only directly responsible for the labour force in that one business, but the labour force is part of the 3 pillars of capitalism: the workers, the owners, the marketplace. All these 3 things are so entwined. If you take a major business out of a town, you take away the people's money, you take away the spending potential, and other businesses collapse in the wake of that. It presses the entire area. And honestly, for Western governments to allow this to go on as long as they have takes the piss. Yes, you've brought your jobs going abroad, your industry's going abroad, your manufacturing is going abroad. You've only got 2 choices. You either make it illegal to do that, or you put up with it. What Trump has just said about lowering taxes, that's nothing. That's not going to get the job done. One American worker will expect, 20 grand a year? Something like that. You're paying your cunts in Thailand, India, you're paying these bastards $1 a day. There's no fucking comparison, and your 30%, 15% income tax bracket isn't going to cut it. Plus, your 30% to 15% corporation tax reduction is going to reduce government coffers substantially. You're already struggling with a private healthcare system. What else is going to have to be privatised? There's no way you're going to create an economy that's fair for everyone when you chunk the government coffers to try and stop people from outsourcing. No, that's not good enough. You have to make it illegal, or you have to just fucking put up with it.
It's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. Companies will come, they will build, they will expand, new companies will start, and I look very, very much forward to doing it. We have to renegotiate our trade deals, and we have to stop these countries from stealing our companies and our jobs.
That was some positive visual imagery, but Trump is sort of appealing to the lowest common denominator here in saying we've got to stop these countries from stealing our jobs. It's not the country, it's the American entrepreneurs. It's your own rich that are fucking you over. Mexico doesn't send ambassadors up into America to seduce people into sending their businesses down south. It's the rich people in America running their cost-benefit analysis, checking out the wages to shipment ratio, checking out their balance sheets and going, we can compete better if we put our factory in China. It's as simple as that. You're being fucked over from within, not from the outside. I don't know why Donald Trump is putting it in these terms, because perhaps it's the illusion that gives you an enemy to face, and it will band you together. Perhaps that's his hope. It's flawed reasoning and the intellectual dishonesty from a man like Trump, who has probably done outsourcing. For him to blame the other countries is brass-faced.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond?
Well, I think that trade is an important issue. Of course, we are 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. And we need to have smart, fair trade deals. We also, though, need to have a tax system that rewards work and not just financial transactions. And the kind of plan that Donald has put forth would be trickle-down economics all over again. In fact, it would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percent of the people in this country than we've ever had.
She's right about that. But if she thinks her own policies are not trickle-down economics, then she's completely fucking ignorant.
I call it trumped up trickle down, because that's exactly what it would be.
That's the sort of thing you would say at a meeting of your own party when you're standing to be elected to represent them in some government election. When you do it in front of the general public, it fudges the issue. Absolutely pointless. The people who are already on your side will get a little chuckle about that. The people on Trump's side will come up with their own thing. They'll be like, oh, well, you're doing hilarious economics that don't make sense, you know? It will devolve to mudslinging, which is what Trump generally doesn't tend to do, although he called Hilary a crook, which may be true. It's his non-political speech which is getting him attention. The Hilary habitual political crap isn't relevant. It isn't relevant to the electorate. It doesn't give you any information to go on. If she can properly explain this, then great, but she isn't going to. She's going to hope that the sound bite sticks, and she's going to dispense with this point pretty fucking quickly.
That is not how we grow the economy. We just have a different view about what's best for growing the economy, how we make investments that will actually produce jobs and rising incomes. I think we come at it from somewhat different perspectives. I understand that. You know, Donald was very fortunate in his life, and that's all to his benefit. He started his business with $14 million borrowed from his father, and he really believes that the more you help wealthy people, the better off we'll be, and that everything will work out from there. I don't buy that. I have a different experience. My father was a small businessman. He worked really hard. He printed drapery fabrics on long tables where he pulled out those fabrics and he went down with a silk screen and dumped the paint in and took the squeegee and kept going. And so what I believe is the more we can do for the middle class, the more we can invest in you, your education, your skills, your future, the better we will be off and the better we'll grow. That's the kind of economy I want us to see again.
Let me follow up a minute.
Hilary tried to hide it, but she flashed a micro expression at the end of that said it all. She was pleased with that. That made her closer to the electorate than Trump could be. That she thinks resonated. She thinks that was an awesome political point. She's playing a game. So her glee, when she does that, her glee micro expressions, her enthusiasm should be about building the economy, not about getting one over on Trump.
Mr. Trump, if I can, you've talked about creating 25 million jobs, and you've promised to bring back millions of jobs for Americans. How are we going to bring back the industries that have left this country for cheaper labor overseas? How specifically are you going to tell American manufacturers that you have to come back?
Well, for one thing, and before we start on that, my father gave me a very small loan in 1975, and I built it into a company that's worth many, many billions of dollars with some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that only because that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. Our country's in deep trouble. We don't know what we're doing when it comes to devaluations, and all of these countries all over the world, especially China, they're the best ever at it. What they're doing to us is a very, very sad thing. So we have to do that. We have to renegotiate our trade deals. And Lester, they're taking our jobs, they're giving incentives, they're doing things that, frankly, we don't do. Let me give you the example of Mexico. They have a VAT tax. We're in a different system. When we sell into Mexico, there's a tax. When they sell in automatic, 16% approximately. When they sell into us, there's no tax. It's a defective agreement. It's been defective for a long time, many years, but the politicians haven't done anything about it. Now, in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, yes, is that okay? Good. I want you to be very happy. It's very important to me. But in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, when she started talking about this, it was really very recently. She's been doing this for 30 years. And why hasn't she made the agreements better? The NAFTA agreement is defective just because of the tax and many other reasons, but just because of the fact.
Let me interrupt just a moment.
Secretary Clinton and others, politicians, should have been doing this for years, not right now because of the fact that we've created a movement. They should have been doing this for years. What's happened to our jobs and our country and our economy generally is, look, we owe $20 trillion. We cannot do it any longer, Lester.
Back to the question, though, how do you specifically bring back
When a politician can't answer a question, they blar on for as long as they can on a bunch of other stuff. It's a simple psychological trick. Somewhere in there, they hope, there is something that resonates with somebody. They get 1 or 2 points that resonate with the listener. That's what the listener picks out. It's not the fact they didn't answer the question. You pick up, oh yeah. That's why they do it. That's why they chops on so much. Obviously, you can't pull American businesses back from where they're currently operating successfully. The questioner knew that you couldn't do that. Trump knows that you can't do that. So he chops on a load of bollocks. I think Hilary looks like one of those puppets on that picture. She looks like a Terrorhawk or a Captain Scarlet type thing.
Jobs, American manufacturers, how do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. There are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever. And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this, because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave, because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
Let me let Secretary Clinton get
Well,
there.
let's stop for a second and remember where we were 8 years ago. We had the worst financial crisis, the Great Recession, the worst since the 1930s. That was in large part because of tax policies that slashed taxes on the wealthy, failed to invest in the middle class, took their eyes off of Wall Street, and created a perfect storm. In fact, Donald was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis.
I'd bet any money that Hilary doesn't understand the credit crunch. It actually harkens back to what I was saying about the working class wage in America should be $200,000 a year. All that money in the hands of executives, and some young executives, started to get put in hedge funds. The guys had too much money. Some of them didn't even know how much money they had, and they started putting it in hedge funds, and the hedge fund managers started taking bigger and bigger and bigger risks because there was so much money coming from so many different directions. It would very easily switch. If the return wasn't good enough, the investors would just put their money elsewhere. So as a hedge fund manager, you had to make a good return. So these guys were taking bigger and bigger risks, which is where you get the better returns. But obviously, if you get slammed, you take a big financial hit. You can lose all of it. And that's exactly what happened. They took the biggest risk of all, investing in these stupid subprime mortgages, and they got caught with their pants down. Fucking billions evaporated from the global economy overnight. And some of the banks facing bankruptcy couldn't do transactions. People didn't trust them to do transactions. Your economy was about as close to meltdown collapse as it's ever come. It actually froze for a few hours, I think it was. Trade stopped. The worst thing that could possibly happen for Hilary to try and soundbite this situation. The actual truth is sort of lies underneath the shit version of reality that she's just come out of her mouth. I wouldn't trust her at all. I think she's incompetent. I don't think she's got the intellect to grasp the issues that she thinks she knows about.
He said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people lost their jobs. 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out. Now, we have come back from that abyss, and it has not been easy. So we're now on the precipice of having a potentially much better economy, but the last thing we need to do is to go back to the policies that failed us in the first place.
They were your policies. They were your husband's policies. They were the policies of every administration that's had an economic policy since the year dot. In the UK, we had a Labour government, a socialist-leaning government, and the credit crunch still happened. We had one of the most brilliant prime ministers of all time, Tony Blair. was in power for about, I think, 12 years. Gordon Brown took over, credit crunch happened. Wasn't Gordon Brown's fault, wasn't Tony Blair's fault. Yeah, Labour deregulated the banks, which opened the gates for us to take a much bigger hit and suffer nearly as much as America did. But the actual situation was set up. The next credit crunch will be as bad as this one, will be as bad as what you guys had in the 1930s. The system, when it's open to risk-taking, money-grubbing motherfuckers, and it goes through its natural cycles, you'll get blindsided again. You won't see it coming, you won't understand it. People like you, Hilary, have always been blindsided by stuff like this because you just aren't hands-on enough. You don't understand the economy. You don't understand how money-grubbing mindsets, plus the economy, plus the people at the lower end of the capital system, always leads to a repetitive cycle of the people at the bottom getting fucked because of the mistakes of people at the top. You're oblivious. And so is Donald Trump.